A 3-year-old boy vanishes in the time it takes to make a cup of tea. No screams. No struggle. No trace. Just gone. His mother knows something, has always known something, but for 10 years she couldn't say a word. Not one word. Until now. And what she's finally revealed has investigators scrambling, the public horrified, and everyone asking the same question. If she knew this all along, how many other secrets are still buried in Kendall? Stay with me because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about the William Tyrell case. Before we go further, if cases like this matter to you, hit that subscribe button right now because we're about to go deep into a story that will leave you speechless. September 12, 2014. Kendall, New South Wales. A small town where everyone knows everyone, where kids play in yards without fear, where the biggest excitement is usually the weekly farmers market. It's 10:30 in the morning. The sun is bright, the air is warm, and a little boy in a Spider-Man costume is playing hide and seek. His name is William Tyrell. He's 3 years old. Brown hair, bright eyes, that costume he refuses to take off because in his world he is Spider-Man. He's running around his foster grandmother's house, that carefree kind of running that only belongs to children who don't yet know the world can be cruel. His mother, the woman who has loved him from the moment he was placed in her arms, is inside. She's making tea. Just tea. A simple, ordinary act that millions of people do every single day without consequence. But when she walks back outside, cup in hand, William is gone. Not hiding behind a tree. Not playing in the garden. Gone. Vanished. As if he never existed. And in that moment, her entire world shatters. But here's what you don't know, what nobody knew until very recently. From that moment forward, she couldn't speak. Not because she didn't want to. Not because she was hiding something in the way you might think. But because the law, the system designed to protect children like William, had silenced her. For 10 years she's watched the theories, the speculation, the accusations, all while knowing things she couldn't say. Until last month. When everything changed. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching this from because this case has gripped people across the entire world, and I want to know how far William's story has reached. Are you watching from Australia? The UK? The US? Canada? Let us know, and while you're down there, hit that like button if you want us to keep covering cases that matter. The question everyone wants answered is simple. Why now? Why, after 10 years of absolute silence, has William Tyrell's mother finally spoken out? What changed? What pushed her past the legal barriers, past the fear, past the decade of being told to stay quiet? To understand that, you need to understand something fundamental about this case that most people overlook. William Tyrell was a foster child. That single fact created a labyrinth of legal restrictions that turned his own mother into a prisoner of silence. In New South Wales, the laws surrounding foster care are strict, unbelievably strict, designed to protect the privacy and safety of children in the system. And those laws meant that William's foster parents, including his mother, were forbidden from speaking publicly about almost anything related to the case. They couldn't give interviews. They couldn't defend themselves against online accusations. They couldn't even correct the wild theories that spread like wildfire across social media and true crime forums. Imagine that. Imagine your child disappearing, and then imagine being legally prohibited from speaking about it, from telling your story, from defending yourself when strangers online accuse you of the unthinkable. That was her reality, every single day for 10 years. But something shifted. In recent weeks, amidst new inquest developments and mounting pressure from a public that never stopped demanding answers, those restrictions were partially lifted. Not completely. Not entirely. But enough. Enough for her to finally speak. And what she said has sent shockwaves through the investigation, through the community of Kendall, and through everyone who has followed this case since that terrible day in 2014. She didn't just break her silence to tell her side of the story. She broke it because she has information. Information that, according to legal experts, could potentially redirect the entire investigation. Information about that morning. About the moments before William vanished. About things she saw, things she heard, things that have haunted her every single day for a decade. And she's not the only one talking now. Because when she spoke, others started speaking too. Witnesses who stayed quiet. Neighbors who thought their observations weren't important. People who were afraid to get involved. Her words opened a floodgate, and now investigators are drowning in new leads, new possibilities, new directions in a case that had seemingly run cold. Let me take you back to that day. September 12, 2014. Not to the sanitized version you've read in news reports, but to the real, visceral, terrifying experience of what happened. William's foster grandmother's house sits on Benarun Drive, A quiet street that dead ends into thick Australian bush. The kind of bush that's beautiful in photographs but unforgiving in reality. That's easy to get lost in. William had been at the house since the day before. His mother and father had driven him and his sister up from Sydney for a visit, the kind of visit that should have been filled with nothing but joy and the simple pleasures of grandparent time. The morning started normally. Breakfast, playing. That Spider-Man costume that William insisted on wearing everywhere. His mother has said, and this is something she's mentioned multiple times now that she can speak, that William was happy that morning. Excited. He loved being Spider-Man. He loved running around the yard, climbing on things, pretending to shoot webs at imaginary villains. He was just being a 3-year-old boy, living in that magical space where imagination and reality blur together seamlessly. Around 10:30 a.m. his mother went inside. Multiple sources, including her own recent statements, confirm this timeline. She's been very specific about it, almost obsessively so, because she knows that every minute matters. Every second matters. She went inside to make tea for herself and William's grandmother. This is important. This detail. Because it's been used against her, twisted into something sinister by armchair detectives and conspiracy theorists who think they can solve a case from their keyboards. But she's been clear, painfully clear, that this was not negligence. This was not leaving a child unattended in a dangerous situation. This was stepping inside her own mother's house for a few minutes while her son played in what should have been a safe, enclosed yard. When she came back outside, tea in hand, William was gone. Not just out of sight. Gone. She called for him. No answer. She walked around the yard. No sign of him. She checked the front, the sides, the back. Nothing. And then the panic set in. The real, primal panic that every parent fears but hopes they'll never experience. She started shouting his name. Running. Her voice getting more desperate with every unanswered call. William. 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 His name echoing through the quiet morning air, becoming more frantic, more terrified with each repetition. His foster father, who had been inside the house, came running out. Then the grandmother. Within minutes they were all searching, all calling, all feeling that growing dread that something was terribly, horrifically wrong. At 10:56 a.m., just 26 minutes after William was last seen, his mother called the police. That call, the recording of which has never been publicly released but has been described by those who've heard it, was apparently heartbreaking. A mother in absolute crisis, her voice breaking, barely able to form coherent sentences, begging for help. Begging for someone to find her little boy. The police arrived quickly. Within minutes. And within an hour, Kendall was swarming with officers, volunteers, emergency services, everyone searching for a little boy in a Spider-Man costume. They searched the house, the yard, the surrounding properties. They brought in dogs, helicopters, specialist search teams. They combed through that dense bush with the kind of intensity and thoroughness that only happens when a child is missing. And they found nothing. No clothing. No footprints beyond the immediate vicinity of the house. No signs of struggle. No evidence that William had wandered into the bush on his own. It was as if he had simply been erased from existence in the span of a few minutes. If you're still watching, drop a like right now because what I'm about to tell you next is something that most people don't know, something that his mother has only recently been able to confirm, and it changes everything. The theories started immediately. As they always do. Some said William wandered into the bush and got lost, succumbing to the elements or an accident in that vast, unforgiving wilderness. Others said he was taken by someone, snatched in those brief minutes when he was alone in the yard. The darker theories, the ones that spread like poison across the internet, suggested something even more sinister. That someone in the family was responsible. That the story didn't add up. That there was a cover-up. William's mother has watched all of this unfold in silence. She's seen her family accused. She's seen herself accused. She's read the theories, the speculation, the outright accusations from people who have never met her, never experienced the nightmare she's living. And she couldn't respond. Couldn't defend herself. Couldn't tell her truth. The legal restrictions meant that even as her name was dragged through the mud, even as people called her a liar, a suspect, worse, she had to stay silent. Imagine the psychological torture of that. Imagine losing your child and then being unable to speak about it while the world judges you. But she wasn't just silent because of the law. She was silent because she was terrified. Terrified that saying the wrong thing might jeopardize the investigation. Terrified that speaking out might somehow hurt the chances of finding William. Terrified that her words might be twisted and used against her. So she stayed quiet even when it was killing her inside because she believed she had to believe that staying silent was the best thing she could do for her son. For 10 years she lived with that burden. 10 years of watching the case grow cold, of seeing the search efforts diminish, of feeling William slip further and further away from public consciousness. 10 years of wondering if he was alive, if he was suffering, if he thought she had abandoned him. 10 years of guilt, grief, fear and forced silence. Until recently, when the legal landscape shifted and she finally could speak. And what she's revealed has investigators taking a hard second look at everything they thought they knew. Before we get into what she actually said, I need you to understand the context of this case beyond just the disappearance itself. Because William Tyrell's case isn't just about a missing child. It's about systemic failures, about how foster care systems can sometimes create barriers to justice, about how public perception can be shaped by speculation rather than fact. William was placed in foster care when he was just 9 months old. His biological parents had issues that made them unable to care for him safely, and the state intervened. That's all we can say about that situation due to privacy laws, but it's important to know that William's foster parents didn't know his biological family. This wasn't a kinship placement. These were people who opened their home and their hearts to a child who needed them, and by all accounts they loved William deeply. They loved him as their own. Which makes what happened even more tragic, even more devastating. Because they didn't just lose a foster child. They lost their son. The investigation into William's disappearance has been one of the largest and most intensive in Australian history. Over the years, police have conducted thousands of interviews, executed countless search warrants, dug up properties, drained dams, searched mineshafts. They've followed hundreds of leads, investigated dozens of persons of interest, ruled out countless theories. And yet, as of today, they are no closer to finding William Tyrell than they were on September 12, 2014. No body has been found. No evidence of what happened to him. No arrests made. Nothing. Just questions. Endless, tormenting questions. In 2019, the coroner's inquest into William's disappearance began. These inquests are complex legal proceedings designed to determine, if possible, how a person died or disappeared. The inquest into William's case has been stop-start, delayed multiple times, and has heard evidence from dozens of witnesses including police, experts, family members and locals from Kendall. Throughout all of this, William's mother has been present but silent. Watching. Listening. Unable to contribute in the way she wanted. Unable to tell her story. Then just weeks ago something changed. Reports emerged that the coroner had partially lifted some of the foster care publication restrictions. This was huge. This meant that William's foster parents, who had been living under these restrictions for a decade, could finally speak more freely about certain aspects of the case. And William's mother decided it was time. Time to tell her truth. Time to share what she's been holding inside for 10 years. Time to fight back against the speculation and the accusations and the conspiracy theories. She gave an interview, carefully navigated within the still existing legal boundaries, and what she said was both heartbreaking and potentially game-changing. She talked about that morning. About the moments before William disappeared. She talked about a car. A car that she saw driving slowly down Benarun Drive right around the time William vanished. A car that, according to her, she reported to police immediately but that somehow got lost in the chaos of the initial investigation. Comment below if you think this car detail changes everything because I want to know what you think. Does this new information about a suspicious vehicle redirect the entire investigation? Let me know your theory in the comments right now. This car detail is critical. In her statement, William's mother described seeing an older model sedan, light-colored, driving slowly past the house. She said the driver, who she couldn't clearly identify, appeared to be looking at the property. At the time she didn't think much of it. People drive down suburban streets. People look at houses. It's normal. But after William disappeared, that car took on a sinister significance. She told police about it during those first frantic hours, describing it as best she could remember. But somehow, in the mountains of information being processed in those early days, this detail didn't receive the attention she believes it deserved. What? There are several possibilities. Perhaps it was logged but not prioritized. Perhaps in the chaos of a massive search operation, it got overlooked. Perhaps investigators at the time didn't believe it was significant. Or perhaps, and this is what haunts her, it was taken seriously but the car was never found, the driver never identified, and it became just another dead end in a case full of dead ends. But here's where it gets interesting. Since William's mother came forward with this information publicly, multiple other witnesses have come forward saying they also saw a suspicious vehicle in the area that day. Some descriptions match what she described. Others describe different vehicles. This has opened up an entirely new avenue of investigation that, according to recent reports, police are taking very seriously. They're re-interviewing residents of Kendall from 2014. They're looking at traffic camera footage if any exists from that time. They're trying to identify every vehicle that was in that area during the critical window when William disappeared. Because if William was abducted, if someone took him in those brief minutes when he was alone, then a vehicle is how they would have gotten him out of there quickly. The bush is too dense, too difficult to navigate with a struggling child. But a car? A car could be parked on Benarun Drive, could snatch a child in seconds, and could be kilometers away before anyone even realized he was missing. William's mother has also spoken about the guilt she's carried for 10 years. The crushing, soul-destroying guilt of turning her back for just a few minutes. She knows, rationally, that making tea doesn't make her responsible for what happened. She knows that she wasn't negligent, that she was being a normal parent doing a normal thing. But guilt doesn't operate on logic. Guilt is emotional, irrational, all-consuming. She said in recent statements that she replays those minutes over and over in her mind. What if she'd stayed outside? What if she'd taken William inside with her? What if she'd walked to the front of the property first instead of the back when she couldn't find him? What if? These questions have tortured her for a decade, and now that she can finally speak, she's sharing that pain with the world, hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone out there knows something that can help bring William home. She's also addressed the conspiracy theories directly, something she's never been able to do before. The theories that she or her husband were involved. The theories that William's death was an accident that was covered up. The theories that the whole family is lying. She's looked into the camera, her voice steady despite the obvious emotion, and said unequivocally, "We did not hurt William. We loved him. We love him still. We want him found more than anyone in the world." And she's pleaded with anyone who might have information, no matter how insignificant it might seem, to come forward. Because somewhere out there, someone knows something. Someone saw something. Someone heard something. And that someone could be the key to finally solving this case. The timing of her decision to speak out is also significant. It comes at a moment when the investigation appears to have reached a critical juncture. In recent years, police have focused their attention on several persons of interest, including examining the possibility that someone with connections to the Kendall area was responsible. There have been high-profile search operations, including a major dig at a property in Kendall in late 2021 that captured international attention. That search yielded no evidence of William, but it demonstrated that police were still actively pursuing leads. The inquest has also heard explosive testimony from various witnesses, including claims and counterclaims about what happened that day, about who was where and when, about suspicious behavior and statements. It's been a pressure cooker of information, speculation, and emotion. And into this environment, William's mother has now added her voice, her truth, her plea for justice. Her speaking out has done something else, something perhaps unexpected. It's rehumanized the case. 4 years, William Tyrell has been a mystery, a puzzle, a true crime case to be dissected and analyzed. He's been discussed in forums, podcasts about, made into documentaries. And somewhere along the way, it's easy to forget that this is a real child, a real family, real people experiencing real suffering. By speaking out, by showing her pain, by breaking that silence with obvious difficulty and emotion, William's mother has reminded everyone that this isn't entertainment. This is tragedy. This is a family torn apart. This is a little boy who should be 13 years old now, starting high school, playing sports, being a kid. Instead, he's been missing for 10 years, and every day that passes makes it less likely he'll ever be found alive. That's the brutal truth that William's mother lives with every single moment of every single day. If you're feeling the weight of this story, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed, because we're about to go even deeper into what these revelations mean for the investigation and what happens next. There's something else that William's mother revealed that hasn't gotten as much attention but is equally significant. She talked about the moment she realized William was truly gone. Not just missing, not just lost, but gone in a way that suggested something terrible had happened. She described searching the immediate area and knowing with a certainty that defied logic, that William hadn't just wandered off. He was a cautious child in some ways. He didn't like being too far from his parents. He would call out if he couldn't see them. The fact that he wasn't responding to her increasingly desperate calls told her something was very wrong. And then there was the silence. The complete, absolute silence of the bush. No sounds of a child moving through undergrowth. No crying. No calling for help. Just silence. That silence, she said, was the moment she knew her life had changed forever. The psychological impact of losing a child this way with no answers, no closure, no body to bury, is something most people cannot fathom. It's called ambiguous loss, a term coined by psychologist Pauline Boss to describe the grief of losing someone without confirmation of death. It's the cruelest kind of loss because it offers no resolution. You can't move forward because there's always the hope, however small, that they might be alive. But you can't stay in place either because the reality of their absence is undeniable. You're trapped in this liminal space between hope and despair, between life and death, between finding them and never knowing. William's mother has lived in this space for 10 years. 10 years of waking up and wondering if today will be the day they find him. 10 years of jumping every time the phone rings, hoping it's the call that will end the nightmare. 10 years of seeing children who are William's age and imagining what he would look like, how tall he'd be, what his voice would sound like. 10 years of existing in a state of suspended trauma. And through all of this, she's had to be strong for William's sister, who was just 5 years old when her brother disappeared. That little girl, now a teenager, has grown up in the shadow of this tragedy. She's lived her entire childhood with the absence of her brother, with the grief of her parents, with the public attention and speculation surrounding her family. The impact on her is immeasurable, and yet another dimension of suffering that this case has created. William's mother has spoken about trying to maintain some sense of normalcy for her daughter, about trying to give her a childhood despite everything, about carrying the weight of 2 children's lives, the one missing and the one still here. The strength required to do that is difficult to comprehend. Some people might wonder why William's mother waited until now to speak out. Why not push harder against the legal restrictions years ago? Why not fight to tell her story sooner? These are fair questions with complicated answers. The simple truth is that she was advised by lawyers and police that staying silent was in the best interest of the investigation. She was told that speaking publicly could jeopardize potential prosecutions, could alert suspects, could compromise the case in ways that might mean justice for William could never be achieved. So she stayed silent because she believed, rightly or wrongly, that her silence gave William the best chance of being found. There's also the matter of self-preservation. The online harassment, the conspiracy theories, the accusations, they took a massive toll on her mental health and the well-being of her family. Engaging with that, responding to it, would have meant diving deeper into a toxic cesspool of judgment and speculation. Sometimes silence isn't weakness or guilt. Sometimes silence is survival. But now, with the partial lifting of restrictions and the case reaching what feels like a critical point, staying silent no longer feels like the right choice. Now it feels like it's time to fight, time to push, time to demand the answers and attention that William deserves. The question of what happened to William Tyrell remains unanswered, but the question of why his mother stayed silent for so long has now been answered. She stayed silent because she had to, because she was told to, because she believed it was best. And now she's speaking because she can, because she must, because 10 years is long enough to live in the shadows of a mystery that has stolen her son and her voice. The investigation into William's disappearance has had its share of controversies and missteps over the years. There have been questions about how the initial search was conducted. There have been criticisms of police for focusing too heavily on certain theories while perhaps neglecting others. There have been accusations of tunnel vision, of investigators becoming so committed to a particular narrative that they miss evidence pointing in other directions. None of this is to say that police haven't worked tirelessly on this case. They have. Hundreds of officers over the years have dedicated themselves to finding William. But investigations are human endeavors and humans make mistakes. Evidence gets overlooked. Leads fall through cracks. Witnesses aren't interviewed until years later when memories have faded. And in a case this complex, with this many moving parts, it's almost inevitable that something will go wrong somewhere. William's mother speaking out now has, in some ways, forced a reckoning. It's forced investigators to look again at details from that first day. It's forced a re-examination of assumptions made early in the case. It's forced everyone involved to ask, what did we miss? The car that William's mother saw is now being treated as a significant lead. Police have released appeals asking anyone who was driving in the Kendall area on September 12, 2014, particularly on Benarun Drive between 10 and 11 a.m., to come forward. They want to know what people saw, where they were going, why they were in the area. They're trying to build a complete picture of every vehicle, every person, every movement in and around that street during the critical window. This is painstaking work. This is detective work at its most tedious and detailed. But this is also how cases get solved. Not usually through dramatic breakthroughs or confessions, but through the slow, methodical accumulation of small details that eventually form a picture. One witness remembers a car. Another remembers seeing a person. A third remembers something that seemed odd at the time. Put all those pieces together, cross-reference them, verify them, and maybe, just maybe, you find your answer. That's what investigators are hoping William's mother's statements will facilitate. A fresh wave of information from people who've stayed silent until now, either because they didn't think what they knew was important, or because they were afraid, or because they simply didn't realize the significance of what they'd seen. Let me tell you something about memory and witnesses in cases like this. Human memory is notoriously unreliable, especially after 10 years. People convince themselves they saw things they didn't. They conflate memories from different times. They let media coverage and public speculation influence what they remember. This is a huge challenge for investigators. When someone comes forward now saying they saw a suspicious car in 2014, how do you verify that? How do you separate genuine memory from false memory? How do you determine if what they're telling you is fact or fiction? This is why investigators will be approaching all new information with careful skepticism. They want tips. They need tips. But they also need to verify everything, to corroborate details, to ensure they're not being led down another dead end by well-meaning but mistaken witnesses. It's a delicate balance, and one that requires enormous skill and patience. William's mother has also spoken about what she wants people to remember about William. Not William the missing child. Not William the true crime case. But William the little boy. She's described his laugh, his love of dinosaurs, the way he would insist on wearing that Spider-Man costume everywhere. She's talked about his kindness, how gentle he was with animals, how he would share his toys with his sister even when he didn't want to. She's painted a picture of a real child, a whole person, someone with a personality and quirks and dreams. Because that's what's been lost. Not just a case to be solved, but a person. A little boy who deserved to grow up, to have a life, to become whoever he was meant to become. And by speaking about him this way, by humanizing him, she's asking all of us to remember that. To not let William become just another statistic, just another cold case, just another mystery. He was real. He is real somewhere, whether alive or dead. And he deserves to be found. He deserves justice. He deserves to be brought home. Before we move forward, drop a comment right now telling me what you think happened to William Tyrell. Do you think the car is the key to solving this? Do you think he wandered into the bush? Do you have your own theory? I want to hear from you, and so does everyone else watching. Let's keep this conversation going in the comments, because every discussion keeps William's case alive, and that's what his mother wants more than anything. For people to keep talking, keep caring, keep searching for answers. The revelation of the car has sparked intense debate among those following the case. Some believe this is the breakthrough that's been needed for years. Others are more skeptical, pointing out that countless suspicious vehicles have been investigated over the years with no results. There's also the question of whether this car actually exists, or whether it's a memory that's been distorted over time by grief and desperation. These are uncomfortable questions, but they're questions that need to be asked. Not because anyone wants to doubt William's mother, but because in investigations, everything must be verified. Everything must be scrutinized. That's how you find truth. What's undeniable is that William's mother's decision to speak out has reignited public interest in this case. Google searches for William Tyrell have spiked. News outlets across Australia and internationally have covered her statements. Social media is buzzing with discussion and speculation. The case is front and center again, which is exactly what she hoped would happen. Because public attention means pressure. Pressure on investigators to keep pursuing leads. Pressure on anyone who knows something to come forward. Pressure on the system to not let this case go cold, to not let William be forgotten. In cases like this, public attention can be a double-edged sword. It keeps the case alive, but it also invites speculation, conspiracy theories, and armchair detectives who think they can solve it from their computers. William's mother has had to accept that by speaking out, she's opening herself up to renewed scrutiny and judgment. But she's decided that's a price worth paying if it means even the smallest chance of finding her son. There's something profoundly brave about what she's done. After 10 years of silence, after 10 years of being told to stay quiet, to not rock the boat, to trust the process, she's decided to use her voice. She's decided that enough is enough. That she will no longer be silenced. That she will fight for her son in the only way she can now, by keeping his story alive, by demanding answers, by refusing to let the world forget him. This is maternal love in its most raw, powerful form. This is a mother who will not stop, who will not give up, who will not accept that her son is just gone with no explanation. And that kind of determination, that kind of refusal to surrender to despair, is something worth recognizing and respecting. Whatever you think about the case, whatever theories you believe, There's no denying the courage it takes to break a decade of silence and lay your pain bare for the world to see. That's what William's mother has done, and the ramifications of that decision are still unfolding. The investigation is ongoing. New leads are being pursued. And for the first time in years, there's a sense that maybe, just maybe, something is going to break. Maybe someone will come forward with the piece of information that cracks this case wide open. Maybe the car will be identified. Maybe the truth about what happened on September 12, 2014, will finally be revealed. Or maybe not. Maybe this will be another chapter in a long, painful story that still has no ending. Maybe the answers will remain elusive. Maybe William will never be found. That's the brutal reality that William's mother faces every day. The possibility that she might never know. That she might spend the rest of her life wondering, searching, hoping against hope. But she's decided that uncertainty is better than silence. That fighting is better than accepting. That speaking out, even with no guarantee of results, is better than staying quiet and letting her son's case fade into obscurity. So she's spoken. And the world is listening. The question now is, what happens next? What do these revelations mean for the investigation? What will come of the new attention, the new tips, the new pressure? We're about to explore exactly that, and what I'm going to tell you next about how this one statement has completely shifted the direction of the investigation will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about this case. Stay with me because what's coming will shock you, and you need to hear every word of it. This story is far from over, and what William's mother has set in motion is only beginning to unfold. The words William's mother has finally spoken after a decade of forced silence haven't just reignited public interest in the case. They've fundamentally altered the trajectory of the investigation in ways that even seasoned detectives didn't anticipate. When she described that car, that light-colored sedan driving slowly past the house around the time William vanished, she wasn't just sharing a memory. She was potentially providing the missing piece of a puzzle that investigators have been struggling with for 10 years. The question that has haunted this case from the beginning is simple yet seemingly impossible to answer. How did a 3-year-old boy disappear without a trace in broad daylight in the space of just a few minutes? The bush theory, while initially compelling, has never fully made sense to many investigators. Yes, the Australian bush is dangerous. Yes, a small child could get lost in it. But the immediate and intensive search that followed William's disappearance should have found some trace of him if he'd wandered in there. A piece of clothing. A footprint. Something. The dogs would have picked up his scent. The helicopters with thermal imaging would have detected him if he was alive. The hundreds of volunteers combing through the undergrowth would have found some evidence. But there was nothing. As if William had simply been plucked from existence. That's why the abduction theory has always been the one that many investigators privately believed was most likely. But abduction in that short window of time seemed almost impossible without a vehicle. Someone would have to have been there, right at that moment, ready to snatch a child. They would have to have known the layout of the property. They would have to have known that William was there. They would have to have acted with incredible speed and precision. The odds of all of that lining up seemed astronomically low. Unless someone was watching. Unless someone had been driving past, had seen an opportunity and had taken it. That's what the car represents. It represents premeditation or at least opportunity. It represents a means of quickly removing William from the area. It represents the answer to the question of how this could have happened so fast. William's mother has said that when she saw the car, it was moving slowly, almost idling down the street. The driver appeared to be looking at the houses. At the time, she thought perhaps it was someone who was lost or looking for an address, or just a curious passerby. Kendall is a small place. Unfamiliar cars aren't that unusual, especially with tourists and visitors passing through the area. But in retrospect, with the horror of what happened just minutes later, that car has taken on an entirely different meaning. Was the driver watching William? Did they see him playing in his Spider-Man costume and see a vulnerable target? Did they wait for the moment when he was alone, when the adults had gone inside, and then make their move? These are the questions that now drive the investigation forward. The police have confirmed in recent statements that they are treating the vehicle sighting as a credible and significant lead. They've established a dedicated task force to identify every car that was in the Kendall area that morning. They're going through old traffic camera footage, though the technology and coverage in 2014, especially in a small town like Kendall, was limited. They're cross-referencing vehicle registrations, looking at who owned cars matching that description in the surrounding areas. They're re-interviewing witnesses who might have seen vehicles that day but never reported them because they didn't think it was important. This is exhaustive, painstaking work. This is going through records and databases, making hundreds of phone calls, knocking on doors, asking people to remember details from a decade ago. But this is also how cases get solved. What makes this particularly compelling is that William's mother isn't the only one who saw a suspicious vehicle. Since she came forward, at least 3 other witnesses have contacted police saying they also saw unusual cars in the area that morning. One neighbor reported seeing an older model car, possibly cream or light yellow, parked on a side street near Benarun Drive around 10:15 a.m. They remember it because the driver appeared to be sitting in the car, not getting out, just sitting there as if waiting for something. Another witness, a delivery driver who was in the area that morning, has come forward saying they saw a sedan driving erratically, speeding up and slowing down, on the road leading away from Kendall around 11 a.m., right after William would have been reported missing. And a third witness, someone who was visiting family in Kendall that day, remembers seeing a car matching the description parked at a lookout point about 5 kilometers from Benarun Drive. They noticed it because the driver seemed agitated, pacing beside the vehicle. These sightings, if accurate and if they all relate to the same vehicle, create a potential timeline. A car in the area before William disappeared. The same or similar car near his house around the time he vanished. The same or similar car speeding away shortly after. And then that car at a lookout point, with a driver who appeared distressed or agitated. It's not proof. It's not evidence that would hold up in court on its own. But it's a pattern. And patterns are what investigators look for. The challenge now is verification. How do you verify memories from 10 years ago? How do you determine if these witnesses are all talking about the same car or multiple different vehicles? How do you separate genuine recollection from false memory created by suggestion and media coverage? This is where modern investigative techniques come into play. Police are using cognitive interview techniques, working with witnesses to try to extract details they might not consciously remember. They're using technology to age-enhance any photos or videos from that day that might have captured vehicles in the background. They're creating detailed timelines and maps, plotting every reported vehicle sighting to see if a coherent pattern emerges. And they're being careful, so careful, not to lead witnesses or suggest details that might contaminate memories. Because the worst thing that could happen now would be to build a case around a vehicle that never actually existed, that's been created through the power of suggestion and collective false memory. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button right now because we're going into territory that most coverage of this case has never explored, and you're going to want to see where this goes. The legal implications of William's mother speaking out are fascinating and complex. For years, she was bound by foster care confidentiality laws that prevented her from discussing almost anything about William's case publicly. These laws exist for good reasons. They're meant to protect children in the foster care system from having their private information made public. They're meant to prevent foster families from exploiting children's stories for attention or profit. They're meant to maintain the privacy and dignity of some of society's most vulnerable young people. But in William's case, these well-intentioned laws created a situation where the people who knew him best, who loved him most, who had the most information about what happened, were silenced. They couldn't defend themselves against accusations. They couldn't participate fully in the public discourse about the case. They couldn't even correct blatant misinformation. It was a legal straitjacket that prioritized privacy over the search for truth. The partial lifting of these restrictions didn't happen by accident. It was the result of years of legal wrangling, of submissions to the court, of arguments that the public interest in finding William outweighed the need for confidentiality. William's foster parents and their lawyers argued that after 10 years, with William still missing and the case growing colder, the restrictions were doing more harm than good. They were preventing potential witnesses from coming forward because they didn't understand the full context of what happened that day. They were allowing misinformation and conspiracy theories to flourish unchallenged. They were, in effect, hindering the investigation rather than helping it. The court eventually agreed, at least partially. They lifted some of the restrictions, allowing William's foster parents to speak about certain aspects of the case while still maintaining protection around other sensitive information. It was a compromise, a balancing act between privacy and public interest. And it opened the door for William's mother to finally tell her story. But her decision to speak wasn't just about being legally allowed to. It was also a strategic choice, one that she discussed extensively with lawyers, with police, and with family before moving forward. Because speaking out carries risks. It exposes her to renewed public scrutiny and judgment. It potentially opens her up to legal liability if she says something that could be construed as defamatory or that could prejudice a future trial. It makes her and her family vulnerable in ways they haven't been for years. So why do it? Why take those risks? The answer comes down to something simple yet profound. Hope. Hope that someone out there knows something. Hope that by sharing the detail about the car someone will remember seeing it, or will recognize the description, or will come forward with information they've been holding onto for years. Hope that by putting a human face on the suffering, by showing the world that she's a real person in real pain, not just a name in a case file, people will care enough to help. Hope that after 10 years of silence, her voice might be the thing that finally breaks this case open. And it's working. The response to her coming forward has been overwhelming. The police tip line has been flooded with calls. People are sharing her appeals on social media. True crime communities that had moved on to other cases are refocusing on William's disappearance. The renewed attention has even sparked new searches, with volunteer groups organizing to comb through areas of the bush that haven't been searched in years. There's an energy around the case now that hasn't existed for a long time. A sense that maybe, finally, this could be the moment when everything changes. Of course, there are also the skeptics. The conspiracy theorists who insist that William's mother must be lying, that the car is a fabrication meant to divert attention from what they believe really happened. The armchair detectives who think they've solved the case from their keyboards and are convinced that the real answer is something completely different. The trolls who see a grieving mother as an opportunity to spread hate and cruelty. William's mother knew this would happen. She knew that speaking out would make her a target. But she's decided that's a price worth paying. Because for every cruel comment, there's also a message of support. For every conspiracy theory, there's also someone genuinely trying to help. And maybe, just maybe, one of those people holds the key to finding William. Let's talk about the investigative response to her revelations, because this is where things get really interesting. The New South Wales Police Force has confirmed that they've established Strike Force Roseanne. The ongoing investigation into William's disappearance has shifted significant resources to following up on the vehicle leads. They've brought in additional detectives. They've consulted with forensic experts. They've even reached out to behavioral analysts who specialize in stranger abductions of children. This is an all-hands-on-deck moment, and the police are not treating it lightly. One of the key challenges they face is the age of the case. 10 years is a long time in investigative terms. People move away. They forget details. Evidence degrades. Technology from 2014 seems ancient compared to what we have now. The phones that people were using then, the cameras, the GPS tracking, it's all less sophisticated than what we're used to today. But that also means that investigators are going back and looking at old evidence with new technology. They're taking digital files from 2014 and running them through modern enhancement software. They're taking witness statements from a decade ago and cross-referencing them with new information using advanced database systems. They're using techniques and tools that simply didn't exist when William first disappeared. There's also a psychological component to the investigation that's worth examining. The profile of someone who would abduct a 3-year-old in broad daylight is very specific. This isn't a crime of passion. This isn't a moment of rage or impulse in the traditional sense. This is someone who either planned it or who was so opportunistic that they could make a split-second decision and act on it immediately. Behavioral analysts have suggested that if William was abducted, the person responsible likely has a history. Maybe not a history of child abduction specifically, but a history of concerning behavior. Maybe prior arrests for prowling or suspicious behavior around children. Maybe a background that includes violence or sexual offenses. Maybe a job or lifestyle that allows them to travel, to be in different places without raising suspicion. These are the profiles that investigators are working with as they try to narrow down potential suspects. They're looking at known offenders who were in the area at the time. They're looking at people with connections to Kendall who might have known William was there. They're looking at patterns of similar crimes or attempted crimes in the region around that time. This is where the car becomes so crucial. If they can identify the vehicle, they can identify the owner. And if they can identify the owner, they can investigate that person thoroughly. They can look at their background, their whereabouts, their history. They can determine if this was just an innocent person who happened to be driving through Kendall that day, or if this is someone who needs to be looked at very carefully as a potential suspect. The car is the thread that, if pulled correctly, could unravel the entire mystery. But finding it after 10 years is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Cars get sold, scrapped, repainted, moved out of state or country. The vehicle that was in Kendall on September 12, 2014, might not even exist anymore. But investigators have to try. They have to follow every lead, no matter how old or cold, because that's their job. That's what they owe to William. That's what they owe to his family. Drop a like right now if you think this investigation is finally heading in the right direction, and comment below with your honest opinion about whether you think William will ever be found. I want to hear from you because this case needs people who care, people who keep talking about it, people who refuse to let it be forgotten. William's mother has also addressed something in her recent statements that many people have wondered about: why the foster care system seemed to fail William. Not just in terms of the restrictions that kept her silent, but in terms of the broader questions about how he came to be in that situation in the first place. She's been very careful in what she said, because there are still legal protections around William's biological family and the circumstances that led to him being removed from their care. But she's made it clear that William was loved deeply in their home. That he wasn't just a foster placement. He was their son in every way that mattered. They celebrated his birthdays. They took him on family vacations. They read him bedtime stories and kissed his scraped knees and held him when he had nightmares. He was part of their family completely and totally. And that makes what happened even more tragic. Because this wasn't a child who was unloved or unwanted. This wasn't a child who fell through the cracks of a system that didn't care. This was a child who was cherished, protected, cared for by people who would have done anything to keep him safe. And yet, despite all of that love and protection, he was still taken. Still vanished. Still lost to a mystery that has defied every attempt to solve it. There's something profoundly unfair about that. Something that strikes at the heart of every parent's deepest fear. That no matter how much you love your children, no matter how vigilant you are, no matter how safe you try to keep them, sometimes the world can still reach in and take them from you. That's the reality William's mother has been living with. The knowledge that she did everything right, that she loved William completely, that she was being a good parent doing a normal thing, and it still wasn't enough to keep him safe. How do you live with that? How do you wake up every morning and face a world where your child is missing and you couldn't prevent it? The psychological strength required to survive that is immense. She's spoken about therapy, about the years of counseling and support she's needed to function. She's talked about the depression, the anxiety, the PTSD that comes from living through something like this. She's been honest about the days when getting out of bed felt impossible, when the weight of grief and guilt was so crushing she could barely breathe. But she's also talked about the reasons she keeps going. William's sister needs her. Her husband needs her. And William, wherever he is, needs her to keep fighting for him. So she does. Every single day she makes the choice to keep living, keep hoping, keep searching. That's not weakness. That's not giving up. That's survival at its most fundamental. And it's something that deserves recognition and respect, even from those who might question aspects of the case or have doubts about certain details. Whatever you believe about what happened to William, there's no denying the strength it takes to endure what his mother has endured and still keep fighting. The community response to her speaking out has been mixed. In Kendall, where the disappearance happened and where the wounds are still fresh even after 10 years, reactions have ranged from supportive to skeptical. Some community members have rallied around the family, expressing their continued support and their hope that the new attention will lead to answers. Others have expressed frustration, feeling that the case has brought unwanted attention and suspicion to their small town for a decade. There have even been some who've expressed doubt about the car sighting, wondering why it's only now being emphasized when it was supposedly reported from the beginning. These divisions are natural in cases like this. When a child disappears from a small community, it doesn't just affect the family. It affects everyone. It creates suspicion and fear. It makes neighbors look at each other differently. It changes the character of a place. Kendall will forever be known as the place where William Tyrell disappeared, and that's a burden the community carries whether they want to or not. But there have also been beautiful moments of unity. Vigils have been held to mark the 10-year anniversary of William's disappearance. Community members have organized new search efforts. Local businesses have displayed posters with William's image, keeping his face visible and his case in the public consciousness. There's a determination in Kendall and the surrounding areas to not let William be forgotten, to not let his case go cold, to keep fighting for answers until they're found. That sense of collective responsibility, of a community refusing to give up on one of its own, is powerful. It's a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, humans have a capacity for compassion and perseverance that's truly remarkable. And it's something that gives William's mother strength. Knowing that she's not alone in this fight. Knowing that there are people she's never met who care about her son and want him found. Knowing that William's story has touched hearts around the world and that people everywhere are hoping for his safe return or at least for answers that can bring some measure of peace. The media coverage of William's mother's statements has been extensive, and that brings its own complications. True crime has become a massive industry with podcasts, documentaries, YouTube channels, and forums dedicated to dissecting cases in minute detail. William's case has been covered extensively in this ecosystem, which is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it keeps the case in the public eye. It means that people who might never have heard about William otherwise are now aware of his story and might have information that could help. On the other hand, it means that William's disappearance has been commodified. It's become content. It's become entertainment for people who have no connection to the case beyond their fascination with true crime. And that can feel deeply uncomfortable and even disrespectful to those who are actually living this nightmare. William's mother has addressed this tension. She said that while she's grateful for the attention true crime coverage brings to William's case, she also wishes people would remember that this is a real family suffering real pain. This isn't a puzzle to be solved for entertainment. This is a child who is missing. A family that is broken. A tragedy that has destroyed lives. She's asked that people engaging with William's case do so respectfully and thoughtfully. That they remember William as a person, not just a mystery. That they consider the impact their words might have before posting theories or accusations online. That they think about how they'd feel if this was their child, their family, their tragedy being dissected by strangers. It's a reasonable request, and one that unfortunately often goes unheeded in the true crime community. The anonymity of the internet can make people forget that there are real humans on the other end of their comments and theories. But William's mother is hoping that by speaking out, by putting a face and a voice to the suffering, she can encourage more thoughtful and compassionate engagement with the case. She wants people to care. She wants people to help. But she wants them to do so in a way that honors William's memory and respects the family's pain. That's not too much to ask. Before we continue, tell me in the comments right now, do you think the media coverage of true crime cases helps or hurts investigations? Are we as a society too obsessed with these tragedies? Let me know your thoughts because this is an important conversation that needs to happen. The psychological profile of William's potential abductor, if that's indeed what happened, is something that experts have spent considerable time analyzing. The randomness of the crime, if it was a crime, is what makes it so difficult to solve. If William was taken by someone he knew, someone with a connection to the family, that creates a limited pool of suspects that can be investigated.